Ecclesiastes, a guy who sometimes had a hard time feeling the presence of our God. This guy, the Ecclesiastes, another word for teacher or preacher, lived about 300 years before Jesus. He was a wise man, a sage. He was a doubter. He was writing at a time when the popular theology was, if you are blessed by God, it's because you're a really good person. And if you're suffering, if there are curses happening in your life, it must be because you've done something really bad. And of course, that isn't the case all the time, is it? We know. I mean, it would be nice if it were that, but that isn't the reality. Oftentimes, bad things happen to good people. Good things happen to bad people. Oftentimes, we feel like God isn't present with us when we need Him to, and we've done all the right things. So this Ecclesiastes, this wise person, has had enough experiences in his life that he has found that life is essentially meaningless or absurd, or in Stephen's Message translation, smoke. In fact, the book of Ecclesiastes itself begins, all is meaningless. It's the first sentence. All is absurd. All is useless, without merit. Everything is sort of unreliable in life. That is what he has come to discover. It sounds pretty depressing. In fact, he'll even say, this wise man will even say, wisdom itself is meaningless, or smoke. Sometimes it's translated as vanity. We want to hold on to it. Can't do that. You know, it makes me think of Socrates, right? Quoted as saying, the only thing I know for sure is that I don't know. Right? so that, though, to the Ecclesiastes, to this preacher-teacher, isn't really necessarily such a bad thing. It's actually very liberating for him. It's freeing for him. So we'll notice, if you read through the whole book, you'll see that there's a lot of contradictions. Seems like he's up, seems like he's down. He seems to contradict himself. In his umbrella of everything is meaningless or absurd or smoke, he does have some truths, though, within that. One of those is that, well, God is sovereign. He doesn't talk much about God, which makes this book sometimes pretty controversial. Throughout history, it's been real controversial. He doesn't really talk a lot about God. But he says God is sovereign. But within that sovereignty, we have free will. We have free choice. We can choose what to do. One day, all of us are going to die. That is a reality. It's not negotiable. Every single one of us will die. But it pleases God if before that day, we live happily. This is a truth for the Ecclesiastes. He wants us to live happily. In fact, he says, God is so pleased when we do that. Here's the important thing to remember, though. Not to attach our happiness to being happy, because then that would just be more absurdity. That would just be more vanity. So knowing those essential truths for the Ecclesiastes, how do we pursue the happiness that our sovereign God is pleased if we pursue? How do we do that? Well, the Ecclesiastes would say, don't chase after things. Don't covet things. Don't always try to increase yourself materialistically, right? Stop coveting. Stop envying what other people have. Stop collecting all this stuff that you see other people have. Sometimes that's hard to do, isn't it? Have you ever been on Facebook and seen every time somebody gets a new anything, you have to take a picture of it and put it up there, right? And then some of us who don't have that sometimes have this sad feeling like, oh, but I need a new car. I wish I had one of their 8 cars that they have. No, I've seen that. I wish I could go on another vacation this year. These friends of ours have already had 3 or 4. I've had none in the last 20 years or whatever. I've noticed, this happens. Well, the Ecclesiastes will say that doesn't help. Turn off Facebook. Stop looking at that. Don't covet. Don't collect those kinds of things. That's going to be vanity. It's going to be like the shifting sands. The Ecclesiastes, though, says something real important, and that's what I'm focusing on today, on Friendship Soup Day. And that is that we need our friends. We are not meant to go through this life alone, certainly, any more than Adam was supposed to just live in the garden alone, right? He had a companion. The Ecclesiastes says, have community. Don't go through life alone. You are stronger when you're together. You are happier when you're together. Jesus will say later, 300 years later, he will say, wherever 2 or more are gathered, there I am, right? He's pointing to this reality of community. Our God in 3, right, is that community for us. Have you heard that saying before? Some people love to say this. They say, God won't give you anything that you can't handle. He won't give you more than you can't handle. You heard that? It grates on me when I hear that, because it just isn't true. I mean, pick up your Bible, read your Bible. Look at life, look at reality, look at the people you know, maybe even yourself. God will frequently give us more than we can handle. Life will, period. But it doesn't say that in the Bible. It doesn't say that God won't give us anything that we can't handle. God isn't intending us to handle something alone. He's giving us what we can live with in community. We are meant not just to handle something. We're not meant to just survive through this life. We're meant to thrive through this life, and we can't do it, the Ecclesiastes will say, alone. Doesn't work. We need community. We need friends. When I was looking at this passage today, it made me a little sad, and I thought about the saddest story that I ever heard, and it was a true one. This couple that I met a few years ago, I was doing some chaplaincy training in a hospital in San Francisco. And I happened to meet this Russian couple, lived in San Francisco. The husband was there because he had to have a surgery. They were elderly. The husband had a cancer on his leg, and so they had to remove most of his leg. I was their chaplain, so I was giving them spiritual care. So I came in, and the two, they were so, the only word for it is just, it's pathetic. It was just pathetic. It was so desperately sad. Their lives had been turned upside down by this cancer, and now her husband had one leg. And so here I am giving them spiritual care. And part of that was talking to them about who they had in their lives to support them. So I asked them about their family. No family. They were estranged from his side of the family. They were estranged from her side of the family. Zilch. So I asked them about church. I was hoping they went to church. Many of my patients were Russian. Many of them went to the Russian Orthodox Church. No church. We don't go to church. We don't have a church. They have no church family. They have no genetic family. So I asked them about any other things they did out in the community. Do you go to the Lions Club, the Ladies Club, gardening club? I don't know. Who can help these folks? Who can push that wheelchair? She was too frail to push that wheelchair for him. Who's going to help these people? They didn't even have a gardening club. They had a garden, a beautiful garden. Lots of nice plants, lots of nice flowers in their garden. they had collected, but they hadn't collected any family or any friends. I just thought, oh, that is the saddest story. Why were they, and why are we often, because face it, even if we do have church, even if we do have family and friends and clubs, oftentimes we are rather alone. We feel alone, even with those things. But why are we? And why were they so alone? Well, one of the main reasons is simply fear. Of course, the opposite of love. And God is love. Many times we're alone because we are afraid. And if we're afraid, it's hard to smile. It's really hard to smile. In fact, I was watching this thing about smiling last week. The kids and I were researching smiling, weren't we? Right here in God's house. And we learned that if you're frowning, you can't smile. Try it. It's just like, and if you're smiling, you can't frown. It's so strange. The muscles just cancel each other out. It's so weird. But if we're afraid, if there's something here inside that's filled with fear, that we can't open ourselves up, we can't even smile. If you can't smile, you don't open yourself up to the world. And then you're lonely. You know, Mother Teresa said, the worst disease on the planet isn't leprosy or anything else. She said it's loneliness. The worst disease. Fear causes that. But another reason many of us are alone is simply ego. Remember that ego is that Greek word meaning me, myself, or I. Oftentimes, we are so wrapped up in me, myself, or I that we actually end up repelling folks from us. It's ironic. We are supposed to love ourselves, right? I love God, I love our neighbor as ourselves. Sometimes, though, that love is so related to fear that it comes out as ego. And what happens is we will, sometimes unconsciously, most of the time unconsciously, we will project our needs, our hurts, our preferences, our pains. We project it out onto others. We will expect sometimes that others are going to know all about our pain, our needs, our preferences, everything we've gone through. And if they don't, well, they should have, and we'll get real offended if they don't. If they happen to say the wrong thing, sometimes people have to walk on eggshells around us. Sometimes. Because we are so wrapped up in ourselves. We want other people to be just like us often. Isn't that interesting how that happens? And if they don't think like us, if they don't share the same exact opinion, well, we have to tell them how to think, what to do. If they choose something else for their life, we jump right in and say, no, don't do that. Like we know better. Like we are the choreographer of their life. And most of the time, half the time, we can't even handle our own. But then we're going to control someone else's. We have to understand sometimes that not everyone is like us, and not everyone is meant to be like us. Not everyone. It's like the spices in the soup today, you know? Or the spices, some people have a spice rack, some people, I have a spice drawer. Not all my spices are the same. I love cayenne pepper, for example. But it would be ridiculous if I got mad at my oregano because it wasn't like the cayenne pepper. So I got rid of all the oregano. You know, I have my cinnamon, that's great, but I need all of that. People are the same way. People are like that. Spices are like that. Plants are like that. That Russian lady's garden, she told me about her garden. It's a beautiful garden. She knew exactly what this plant needed and that plant needed, and that one needs more sun, that one needs sun in the afternoon, that one needs sun in the morning, and this one's got to water this time and not this time. And she knew a lot about how to nurture her plants. her plants that she collected were a priority. I think the Ecclesiastes would recommend, let's make the people in our lives a priority. Let's do that. If we don't have a lot of people in our lives, let's get some. Let's get some. Let's start smiling. Do you know that people who smile, research has shown they live longer? They live longer. They have lower blood pressure. They have more friends. They get the job faster than someone who interviews who doesn't smile. There's a company I heard about last week that they had it deliberately set up during their interviews. Any candidate that came in for an interview who did not smile at least 4 times, it didn't matter how wonderful their resume was. If they didn't smile at least 4 times, they wouldn't even be considered for the job. Maybe start to smile. Don't have a lot of friends, start smiling. Start listening instead of expecting everybody to listen to us and to understand us. Start listening to everybody. Start listening to those people in our lives. Start calling. Nobody visits? Start visiting people. Share with them. Help people. There's that song, the Magic Penny, right? Love is something if you give it away, you end up having
more.
You guys know it? More. It is exactly right. Love is something if you give it away, and God is love. We are meant to give that love away. We've got to nurture not just the plants in our garden, nurture the people in our garden. One of those ways, well, some people talk to their plants. We could talk to the people in our lives. We could overlook, I love my husband. There's 10%, 5% of stuff about my husband. Not my favorite. But if I notice, and I have the choice, if I notice that 5 or 10% most of the time, and I overlook the 95% of my husband that I just love and I'm overjoyed with, that's not going to nurture him. We've got to start focusing on expressing the gratitude for the tremendous parts of people that we love. The good. Show the good. Focus on the good. We've got to think about what makes the people in our lives tick. Why not do some research? It's like we know that plant needs something and that plant doesn't. What about the friends in our life? Have you heard of that book called The 5 Love Languages? Some people have. Wonderful book! I love that book. Did you know that there are 5 different essential ways that people tend to either feel love or not feel love? So they are touch, time, words, gifts, and acts of service. It's the most interesting thing. So it's like if your love language is, for example, I'll just tell you mine. My love language is time. You can bring me flowers and candy, you can write me cards, you can do all that. But if you don't spend time with me, I don't really feel loved. It's just my energy. That's just the way I am. So I did this research. I found out my husband's love language. His love language is service. I can spend as much time, I can spend all my time with my husband. He's going to be like, oh my God. It's not going to make him feel loved. I've got to be speaking the right language. His love language is service. So if I make his coffee for him, if I edit his papers, right? If I fill up his car with gas, he's going to feel loved. Now, somebody else whose love language is not service, if you fill up their gas tank just because you would like somebody to fill your gas tank, well, they might get offended. Or if you go wash their car because you wish somebody would wash your car, well, they might get offended by that. They might say, don't you think I can wash my own car? Why didn't you send me a card? You know? Other people, they need cards. When people throw cards in the trash, I don't care. We don't need these cards. Find out what somebody's love language is. You can find out your friend's love languages. Do some things for them. You know your friend is coming back from vacation? Go The Enneagram is sort of like a personality scale. There's 9 different types of personalities, from 1 to 9. I'm a 1. A 1 is a perfectionist. A 1 notices that there is a pen on the communion table and hates that. For example, good. I did not plan that, it's just there. We notice what's wrong. There are pluses and minuses about being every single type. There's pluses and minuses about being a perfectionist. That's me. I've had to do a lot of spiritual work about this to get over some of those things. But I'm a perfectionist. I see the world through the eyes of justice. Dave, for example, is an epicure. He's a 7. The epicure sees the world in terms of fun. Yeah, fun. An adventure. And what's the newest thing? So you can see a perfectionist and a fun. There could be some interesting clashes there. So the cool thing about the Enneagram is that when you figure out what somebody's type is, you can learn to recognize those things that might sort of bother you about that person, and you can learn to love those things. Just go, oh yeah, no wonder he's doing that. He's a 7. Or I learned that my mother-in-law is a 2. I learned that my daughter is, I'm not going to even say, it's her own. Oh, she's admitting it. She's a 4. Sometimes, funny, you guys go home and Google the Enneagram. Let's see what's special about a 4. But this can be transformative. I mean, just knowing a love language, just knowing an Enneagram type can transform a marriage, can transform a friendship, can transform your work life, the co-workers you have, your neighbors. It's amazing. Take the time to do these things. I think the Ecclesiastes would say, do these things. Take this time with the people in your life, the people who've been put there for us to love. For us to love. Watch how the love comes back. One of my favorite spiritual teachers is a woman named Byron Katie. I've quoted her before. Some of you know of her. But she says, and it's one of my favorite, and I love this. She says, in life, we sit, we stand, or we lie horizontal. The rest is just a story. We sit, we stand, we lie horizontal. The rest is just a story. I think that the Bible's Ecclesiastes would agree. This one who says, all's meaningless, I'll just smoke. Right? If it's all just meaningless, if it doesn't mean anything, then we now are free to create the meaning. Do you see how beautiful that is? How liberating that is? How true that can be? Why not do that? If we are free to create the story with God, why not make it be the best story? Why not tell the best story in this otherwise meaningless life? Why not tell a story of love, of community, of friendship? Why not? In this world that's filled with uncertainties and vanities and absurdities and places where God has put a period somewhere, sometimes when we wish it would be a comma, because we'd like more of it. Right? The Ecclesiastes will also say there's a season for everything, right? Season to be born, season to die, plant, reap. Sometimes God puts a period where we'd rather it be a comma. Sometimes He puts a comma where we'd rather, no, just to have this be done now. In that kind of world, the very nature of our God, our 3-in-1, is a model that compels us to do and to seek the same thing because, friends, we are stronger together. even when our own story changes, when what we are so sure of disappoints us, when we get bruised in life, or when we feel like we're breaking, with the God of grace, the God of presence, found in fellowship and in friendship, that's precisely where the healing and even the resurrection begins.